What would you do if the one person you trusted most suddenly left you behind, leaving secrets that could change everything? This is the story of a grieving father who, after becoming widowed, made a decision to keep a life-altering secret about a house in Europe from his son. But why? It had only been 3 weeks since we laid Patricia to rest, and yet it felt like the world had already moved on. The funeral flowers had barely begun to wilt, their once vibrant colors now fading into muted tones, the petals curling at the edges as though they too were mourning. And life, this relentless thing that never seemed to pause for anyone, was slowly returning to some semblance of normalcy. I could still hear the distant echoes of people talking, of the usual hum of traffic outside, and the noise of life continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. In a way, it was as if the universe had shifted on its axis, and nothing would ever feel the same again. I had become someone different, someone with an unbearable weight hanging over them, someone who had to learn to move through the world without the person they'd leaned on for so long. That Tuesday morning I found myself standing in the kitchen of our home, the place where Patricia and I had spent so many mornings together. The air was cool, and the steam from my coffee swirled up in delicate spirals, the aroma filling the room with a warmth I couldn't quite feel. It was strange how something as simple as the smell of coffee could make everything feel so out of place. The sound of the kettle bubbling in the background should have brought a sense of comfort, but instead it felt like a distant memory, something from another life. I was alone. It had been like that for days now. I would wake up, go through the motions of getting out of bed, preparing a cup of coffee, and sitting at the table, staring out at the world. Sometimes I'd catch myself lost in thought, wondering if this would ever feel normal again. But it never did. It didn't feel real. This new life I was trying to navigate. I wasn't sure how to handle it. I didn't know if anyone could prepare for this, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that no one really had. And then, in the middle of my solitude, the phone rang. I hadn't been expecting any calls. Not that day, not after everything that had happened. But there it was, the shrill sound of the ringtone breaking through the silence, making my heart jump in my chest. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I stared at it for a moment longer than I probably should have, wondering who it could possibly be. Who would be calling me at this hour, on a morning when nothing felt quite right? With a deep breath, I reached for the phone and answered it. The voice on the other end was familiar, comforting in its own way, but it also felt distant, like it belonged to someone I used to know but hadn't heard from in a while. "Hi, how you doing? It's been a while since we talked." I forced a smile, though I knew no one could see it. "I'm okay," I said, though I didn't feel it. I didn't feel anything that resembled okay. The person on the other end continued, their words a blur of sympathy and polite concern. I found myself nodding along, saying what I thought was the right thing, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was elsewhere. It always was. And then came the question. "So, have you told your son about the house in Europe yet?" The words hung in the air for a moment, as if time itself had stopped, and I was suspended in a reality where everything became painfully clear. My heart dropped, and my stomach twisted into knots. The house. I hadn't told anyone about it. Not my son, not the rest of the family, not even Patricia's closest friends. It wasn't something that had come up in conversation before, and in all honesty, it wasn't something I thought needed to be discussed. Not yet, anyway. But now, in the midst of my grief, with this person asking me about it so casually, I felt exposed. How could I explain something so significant without feeling like I was betraying my wife's memory? How could I justify holding on to something so important, something Patricia had never even mentioned in her final days? The house was a secret, a quiet part of our lives that I hadn't known how to share. And yet, here it was, the question out in the open, hanging between us like an unwelcome guest. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I haven't told him." I didn't know why I said it like that. why I didn't just lie or brush it off. But I couldn't bring myself to lie. Not about this. I could feel the weight of the silence that followed, the pause on the other end of the line as the person processed my answer. "Why?" they asked, their voice a mix of curiosity and concern. I took a long breath, as if I could inhale the courage to explain why this secret weighed so heavily on me. But I couldn't. Not yet. "Because I'm not ready," I finally said, the words feeling more fragile than I intended. "There's too much to explain, too much to figure out." The person on the other end seemed to understand, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more they wanted to say, more they wanted to ask. But they didn't. We exchanged a few more pleasantries before the conversation ended, and I was left staring at the phone in my hand, my thoughts swirling like the steam from my coffee. Why hadn't I told him? I didn't know. I just knew that I couldn't. Not yet. Not while everything still felt so raw, so fresh, so unfinished. Patricia had always been the one who handled everything. She took care of the big things, the decisions, the planning, the logistics. I had always trusted her, relied on her to make sure things ran smoothly. And now, without her, I was left holding the pieces. I was the one who had to figure out how to move forward. I was the one who had to decide what to tell my son, when to tell him, and what to say. And the house, it was just one more piece of the puzzle I didn't know how to put together. It wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of so much more. It represented a life I had no idea how to explain to my son, to anyone. But now, it seemed like the world was forcing me to confront it, and I wasn't ready. The days that followed were a blur. There were phone calls, more questions, more condolences from friends, family, and even strangers who seemed to have a need to check in on me. It was as if they all expected me to fall apart at any moment, and, in truth, I had moments where I felt like I might. But I didn't. At least, not the way they expected. I wasn't the person they thought I should be, grief-stricken, broken, incapable of doing anything but crying and mourning. No, I was holding it together, at least on the outside. On the inside, though, it felt different. It was like I was living in two worlds at once. The one where everything was normal, and the one where Patricia was no longer there, and I had to carry on alone. I didn't know how to navigate it. I didn't know how to be a widow. I didn't know how to face a future that looked so empty without her by my side, and I certainly didn't know how to explain any of this to my son. It wasn't that I didn't want to tell him about the house, I just didn't think he was ready for it. He had enough on his plate already. Losing his mother had been hard enough. Telling him about the house, telling him about everything that had been hidden from him for so long, would be one more thing to add to the pile of confusion and heartache he was already struggling with. I didn't want him to feel burdened with a secret that had been mine and Patricia's to carry, something we'd kept from everyone. But as I thought about it more, I realized that I wasn't just protecting him from the truth. I was protecting myself, too. The house in Europe had always been a part of our life, but it had never been something we talked about openly. It wasn't like the house we lived in, the one where we raised our family, the one where we had countless memories of happy times. No, this was a different place, a quiet escape, a retreat from the chaos of everyday life. It wasn't meant to be a secret, but somehow, over the years, it had become one. Patricia and I had made the decision to buy the house years ago, long before any of this happened. It had been one of those dreams we shared, something we both wanted. A place where we could go to get away from it all. A place where we could just be. We had found the perfect spot in Europe, a small, charming villa nestled in the hills, with views of the rolling countryside and the distant sea. It was everything we had ever wanted, peaceful, private, and far from the demands of our daily lives. We had planned to spend more time there, to escape when things got too overwhelming, but life always seemed to get in the way. And now, after Patricia's passing, it felt like the house was just another reminder of everything we had lost. It was a reminder of the life we could have had, the life we were supposed to have. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had kept from my son. Not just about the house, but about everything. There were things I hadn't shared with him, things I hadn't been ready to face myself. And now, it seemed like the world was pushing me to confront it all, but I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to tell him. The thought of sitting down with him and explaining everything, about the house, about the secret that had lingered for so long it felt impossible. How could I explain it to him without it feeling like a betrayal? How could I explain something that had always been between Patricia and me, something that had never been meant to be shared with anyone else? It wasn't just about the house. It was about the life we had built together, the life that had been torn apart so suddenly. It was about the loss of Patricia, the loss of everything we had planned for the future. It was about the guilt I felt for not being able to protect him from the truth, from the pain that was now a part of our lives. The phone calls kept coming, each one a reminder that I couldn't avoid this forever. People were asking about the house, asking about Patricia's will, about what was going to happen next. And each time, I found myself dodging the question, pretending like it wasn't something I needed to deal with. But it was there, hovering over me, growing bigger with each passing day. I couldn't keep avoiding it. I knew that. But I also knew that I wasn't ready. So, I kept up the charade. I kept pretending like everything was okay. I kept telling myself that I could handle it, that I could face whatever came next. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Days blurred into weeks. The world around me continued as if nothing had happened, but inside, I felt like I was losing myself. The emptiness was consuming. Every time I passed by Patricia's favorite chair or her bookshelves stacked with novels she had lovingly collected over the years, the sorrow would hit me like a tidal wave. It wasn't just the silence that filled the house, it was the absence of everything she used to do. The way she would hum while making breakfast, the way she would laugh at my terrible jokes, the way she would look at me with that knowing smile when I tried to pretend like everything was okay. I missed her more than I could put into words. But more than that, I missed the person I used to be when she was here. I missed the confidence I once had, the feeling of having someone by my side who understood me completely. Now, it felt like I was drifting, floating through a world that no longer made sense. I found myself avoiding the things that reminded me of her, not because I didn't want to remember, but because every memory seemed to take me further into the grief that I was struggling to keep under control. I couldn't allow myself to collapse. Not just yet. My son still needed me. Speaking of my son, the silence between us had grown. I hadn't known how to talk to him, how to explain everything that was happening. I could see the sadness in his eyes when he looked at me, the concern that mirrored my own. He was hurting too, but he wasn't ready to express it the way I was. He didn't have the words for the kind of pain we were both carrying, and I didn't know how to help him find them. I wanted to tell him about the house, about the place that had been Patricia's dream, the place that was now a bittersweet reminder of what we had lost. I wanted to explain to him why I hadn't mentioned it, why I had kept it from him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt like a secret, and secrets are dangerous. They eat away at you, slowly, until they become a part of you that you can't escape. So, I kept avoiding it. And then, one evening, as I was sitting in the living room, trying to focus on a book I couldn't seem to finish, my son walked in. He looked older than I remembered, even though he hadn't changed much at all. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed with the kind of sorrow that made my heart ache. He stood there for a moment, just looking at me, before sitting down across from me. For a while, neither of us spoke. It was like we were both waiting for the other to say something first, but neither of us knew where to begin. Finally, he broke the silence. "Dad," he said, his voice quiet, almost tentative. "Can we talk?" I looked up at him, searching his face for some kind of clue about what he was thinking. He wasn't looking at me directly, but his hands were clasped tightly together in his lap, a sign of the nervous energy that was coiled up inside him. "Of course," I replied, my voice softer than I meant it to be. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, then looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and confusion. I don't understand," he began, his words slow, as if he were trying to find the right ones. "I don't understand why you haven't told me about the house in Europe." The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't expected it. I hadn't even realized he knew about it, let alone had been thinking about it. But there it was, out in the open, the thing I had been avoiding for so long. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath, trying to hold on to some semblance of composure. "I didn't think you needed to know about it," I said, my voice strained. "Not yet." He frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "But why? Why would you keep something like that from me?" It was a question I didn't know how to answer. How could I explain the pain of the house, the weight of it, the symbol of everything we had lost? How could I explain why it felt like such a burden, something I wasn't ready to share? "I guess I wasn't ready," I admitted, the words coming out in a rush. "I didn't know how to tell you about it, or what to say." His eyes softened, and I could see the hurt there, beneath the surface. "Dad, you don't have to keep everything to yourself. We're in this together. I want to know what's going on. I want to understand." I could see it in his face, the need for connection, for answers. He didn't want to be left out of the decisions, the things that would shape his future. And I realized, in that moment, that I had been holding back not just for my own sake, but for his too. "I know," I said quietly. "I know. And I'm sorry. I didn't know how to start this conversation." We sat there for a long time after that, the weight of everything hanging between us. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know how to fix things. But in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't alone in this, and neither was he. "Maybe we can figure this out together," I said, my voice steady now. "Maybe it's time to talk about everything." And just like that, the walls I had built up began to crumble, piece by piece. The conversation with my son felt like a turning point, a moment where the heavy fog of grief and confusion began to lift, even if only slightly. There was still so much left unsaid, so many things I had been avoiding, but somehow, just opening up with him had given me a little more clarity. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't carrying this burden alone. After that evening, things between us began to change. We started talking more about everything. Not just about the house in Europe, but about Patricia, about our memories, about how we were both coping with her loss. It wasn't easy, and there were times when the words caught in my throat, when I didn't know how to explain the depth of what I was feeling. But my son, bless him, was patient with me. He didn't rush me, didn't pressure me to say things I wasn't ready to say. He just listened, and in his listening, he gave me a space to process my own thoughts. And then came the day when I finally took the leap. I had put it off for so long, but I couldn't avoid it any longer. The house in Europe needed to be addressed. It was a part of Patricia's legacy, and it was a part of our future, whether I was ready to face it or not. I had made up my mind to tell my son everything. I called him into the living room that afternoon, a quiet moment between us. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the room. It felt like the perfect time, a moment of stillness before the storm of emotions I knew would follow. "Come, sit down for a minute," I said, motioning to the couch. He hesitated for a second, but then, sensing the gravity in my tone, he sat down beside me. "I need to tell you something," I began, my voice shaky despite my best efforts to remain calm. "Something that your mother and I decided a long time ago." He looked at me, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern, the same look he had given me the night before when he had asked about the house. "I know I haven't told you much about this, but I think it's time you knew." I paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Your mum and I bought a house in Europe years ago. It was something we both dreamed about, a place to escape to when things got too overwhelming. It wasn't just a vacation home. It was supposed to be a sanctuary for us, a place where we could recharge and reconnect." I watched as he processed the information, his brow furrowed, but his face was open. He wasn't angry or upset, just curious. We didn't tell anyone about it, I added, my voice thick with emotion. Not because we didn't want you to know, but because it was something that was just ours. It was our private retreat. We wanted it to be a special place, something we could hold on to for ourselves. And then, when your mum passed, it felt like it wasn't the right time to bring it up. My son nodded slowly, as if trying to absorb everything I was saying. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why keep it a secret? I looked at him, knowing that this was the moment when everything had to be laid bare. Because I wasn't sure how to explain it. I didn't know if you'd understand why it was so important to your mom and me, and more than that, I didn't know how to explain why I've been so reluctant to deal with it now that she's gone. There was a long pause, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. It wasn't an easy thing to digest, especially when the weight of grief hung so heavily over everything we talked about. But I could also see the relief in his eyes, the understanding that came from knowing there were no more secrets between us. I get it, he said quietly, after a moment of contemplation. It's hard. I understand why you didn't want to bring it up. But maybe we should go there. Maybe we should see it together. The suggestion took me by surprise. I had no idea what to expect in that moment, but his words struck a chord with me. I hadn't considered that visiting the house, reconnecting with it, facing it as a family. Do you think you're ready for that? I asked, my voice uncertain. I think we both need it, he replied. I don't want this to be something we avoid forever. We need to face it, even if it's hard. I was amazed at how much maturity my son had shown in such a short time. He was grieving too, but there was a wisdom in his words, an understanding that we had to move forward, even if we didn't know exactly how to. The idea of going to Europe, to that house, seemed so far away physically and emotionally. But as I sat there, listening to my son, I realized that maybe that was exactly what we needed. A fresh start, a new chapter, even in the midst of so much pain. It wasn't about forgetting Patricia or leaving her behind. It was about honoring her memory, about finding a way to keep her with us as we learned how to live without her. We'll go, I said finally, my voice steady now. When the time is right. But we'll go together. You're right. We need to face it. He smiled, a small, bittersweet smile, but it was a smile nonetheless. Thanks, Dad. What? We sat in silence for a while after that, the weight of our conversation settling around us. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't a magical fix to everything we were going through. But it was a start, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. The decision to visit the house in Europe wasn't an easy one to make, but in the weeks that followed, it started to feel like the right choice. It wasn't just about the house itself, it was about what it represented, the memories it held, and the way it had become a part of Patricia's legacy. It was a piece of her, and I needed to find a way to honor that. But it wasn't just about remembering her, it was about finding a way forward, together, as a family. My son and I spent the following weeks preparing for the trip. There were 1,000 details to sort out, flights to book, accommodations to arrange, and of course, the emotional weight of everything we were about to face. I had moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if we were doing the right thing, but each time I thought about backing out, I remembered the look in my son's eyes, the way he had asked for us to face this together, and I knew that I couldn't back away now. It was time. We boarded the plane with a mixture of apprehension and hope. I could tell my son was nervous, his fingers tapping restlessly on the armrest as we soared through the clouds. He hadn't said much since we left, and I respected that. Sometimes, the best way to deal with something so big, so overwhelming, was to be silent, to let the world spin around you while you prepared yourself for the moment you knew was coming. As we landed in Europe, the landscape outside the plane window seemed to stretch on, forever endless hills, sprawling fields, and tiny villages dotted along the horizon. It was breathtaking, in a way that made everything else feel small in comparison. But even the beauty of the countryside couldn't erase the uncertainty that lingered between us. I could feel the weight of the house, the memories, pressing down on both of us, even as we stepped out into the cool air. We arrived at the house the next day, and as we drove through the winding roads that led up to the villa, my heart began to race. I had been here before, of course, but it felt different now. The house, which had once been a dream, now felt like a ghost, a symbol of everything that had been lost. It wasn't that the house itself was eerie. On the contrary, it was beautiful. It was exactly as we had left it, perfectly preserved, just as Patricia had wanted. The stone walls, the terracotta roof, the ivy that crept up the sides, it all looked just as it had when we first walked through the door. But now, with Patricia gone, it felt like a stranger's house, a place that no longer belonged to us. My son was quiet as we walked through the front door, his footsteps echoing in the grand foyer. He glanced around, taking it all in: the high ceilings, the open spaces, the large windows that offered sweeping views of the countryside. It was magnificent, yes, but it was also overwhelmingly empty. "Is this what you meant by a retreat?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. It was supposed to be our escape, our place to get away from everything and just be together. He turned to look at me then, his expression thoughtful. "It's beautiful, Dad. It really is. But it feels like it's waiting for something." I paused, processing his words. "Yeah, I guess it does. But that's the thing with this place. It was never just about the house. It was about the life we wanted to have here. A life that we never really got to live." We spent the next few hours wandering through the house, exploring the rooms, the gardens, the hidden corners that Patricia had loved. There was a quietness to everything, a stillness that made everything feel suspended in time. We didn't speak much, but we didn't need to. The house, with all its beauty and its emptiness, spoke for itself. When the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, we found ourselves sitting in the garden, looking out over the hills. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, the air crisp and cool. It was peaceful, almost surreal, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. "This place, it's more than just a house," my son said, breaking the silence again. I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. "It is. It's a part of your mum. It's a part of us. It always will be." He was quiet for a moment, and then he looked at me with a serious expression. "So, what happens now, Dad? What do we do with it?" It was the question I had been avoiding, the question that had been hanging in the air since we first arrived. What do we do with the house now that Patricia was gone? What was its purpose now, when all we had left were the memories? "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe we don't have to figure it out right now. Maybe we just need to be here, to remember why we came here in the first place." I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't about the house. It was about what the house represented, the dreams we had shared, the life we had built, and the way we were learning to move forward together. "We'll figure it out," I said, my voice steady. "We'll take it one step at a time." He smiled then, a real smile. One that made me feel like maybe we could make it through this after all. The next few days in Europe passed in a blur of quiet reflection and slow conversations. My son and I spent a lot of time together, walking through the vineyards surrounding the house, taking in the beauty of the landscape that Patricia had always loved. We didn't talk about the house much after that initial conversation. Instead, we focused on the present, the now, and we allowed ourselves to remember what had brought us here in the first place, the love that had shaped our family, the life we had built together, and the simple joy of being in each other's company. I found that as I sat on the back porch each evening, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast, dark sky above, I could almost feel Patricia's presence beside me. It wasn't physical, of course. She wasn't there in the way I wished she were, but it was as if her spirit lingered in the air, in the breeze that rustled through the trees, in the soft hum of the night. And for the first time since her passing, I didn't feel entirely alone. We decided to spend one last day at the house before heading back home. There were still things left to figure out, decisions to be made, but for that day, we put it all aside. We took a walk down to the small pond Patricia had loved, the one where we'd spent countless afternoons watching the ducks swim lazily across the water. The scene before us was exactly as I remembered it, still, peaceful and undisturbed. My son sat down on the grass next to me, his eyes following the ripples in the water as they danced in the soft light of the afternoon sunday. "It's strange," he said, his voice thoughtful. "It feels like this place holds so much, but at the same time, it feels like it's empty now. Like we're supposed to fill it with something, but I don't know what." I understood what he meant. The house, the land, the memories, it all felt so full and yet so hollow. It was like we were walking through a beautiful dream, something that was fading with each passing moment. "I think that's the hardest part," I said. "Knowing that we can't fill the empty spaces with anything or anyone, not in the way we had hoped. But maybe that's not what we're meant to do here. Maybe we're just meant to remember, to keep what we have in our hearts, and to move forward." My son looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the understanding in his eyes. He was processing everything in his own way, trying to make sense of it all, just as I was. But in that moment, I realized that we were both on the same journey. We were both trying to find our way, trying to navigate the life that had been left behind. "I think you're right," he said softly. "We can't go back. But we can carry what we've learned, what we've shared, and keep moving forward. Together." The words struck me deeper than I expected. It was simple, but it was everything. It was the kind of wisdom that only comes from experience, from the pain and loss that we had both endured. And in that moment, I knew that we could face whatever came next, not just because we had the house, not because of the memories it held, but because we had each other. We didn't need the house to carry on Patricia's memory. We didn't need it to find meaning in our lives. What we needed was the strength to honor her in everything we did, to remember her every time we found joy, every time we shared a laugh, every time we stood by each other. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I finally broached the subject again. It was time to talk about what came next, what we were going to do with the house, with the legacy Patricia had left behind. "I think it's time we make a decision," I said, looking at my son across the table. "We can't keep this house frozen in time. We have to figure out what to do with it. And we have to do it together." He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I think we should keep it. Not because we're trying to hold on to the past, but because it's a part of us. It's a part of Mom, and it's a part of our family. Maybe we can turn it into a place for new memories, a place we can come back to and visit when we need to remember." The suggestion surprised me, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. This house didn't have to be a symbol of loss. It could be a place of healing, of renewal. It could be the place where we returned, time and time again, to find peace, to reconnect, and to keep Patricia's memory alive. "I think that's a good idea," I said, my voice steady. "We can keep it, but it'll be ours now. It'll be a place for us to visit when we need to find something familiar, something that reminds us of her. We'll make new memories together." The relief that washed over me was immediate. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the right path. There was no easy answer, no perfect solution to the pain of losing Patricia, but this felt like the beginning of something new. It felt like we were finding a way to carry her with us, not by holding on to everything, but by moving forward, by living fully in the present while honoring the past. As we made our decision to keep the house, something shifted within me. It wasn't just about holding on to a physical place, but about holding on to the love that had filled those walls. It was about honoring Patricia's dream for this space, about continuing the life we had started here, even if she wasn't with us to see it. The house was no longer just a reminder of what we had lost. It was becoming a symbol of what we could still build, what we could still create, even in the face of grief. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. We returned home, and life slowly started to regain a sense of normalcy. My son and I were settling into a new routine, one that felt different, but also comforting in its own way. We began to talk more openly about Patricia, sharing our favorite memories of her, laughing over the things she had said or done that still made us smile. It was still painful at times, but it was also healing. The house in Europe wasn't just a physical space, it was becoming a bridge between the past and the future, a place where we could reconnect with her and each other. As we started making plans for the future, we decided that we would return to the house in Europe every year. It would be a place where we could come together, reflect, and create new memories. It would never replace Patricia, but it would be a place where we could continue to honor her, to keep her spirit alive, and to remind ourselves of the importance of family, of love, and of resilience. In the months that followed, I found myself growing more and more comfortable with the idea of moving forward. It wasn't easy, but I was learning that life wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about facing it, embracing it, and using it to grow stronger. I was beginning to understand that grief wasn't something you could simply get over. It wasn't a process with a clear endpoint. But what I was learning was that you could find joy again, even after loss. You could find hope, even in the darkest of times. One afternoon, as I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. It had been over a year since Patricia passed away, and though the pain hadn't gone away completely, it had softened. I still missed her every day. But I had come to accept that missing her was part of loving her. I would always carry her with me, in my heart and in my memories. But I had also learned to carry on. My son joined me on the porch, his presence a comforting reminder that we were in this together. He sat down next to me, and we watched the sky turn from gold to purple, the stars slowly emerging one by one. For a moment, there was silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt like peace. "Dad," he said after a while, his voice soft, "I'm glad we kept the house. It feels like we're still a family, even though Mom's gone." His words struck me deeply, and I realized that he had already come to a place of acceptance, even if it wasn't perfect. Like me, he had learned to live with the loss, to find a way to honor it while still moving forward. We didn't have to be stuck in the past. We didn't have to carry the weight of grief forever. "I'm glad too," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's more than just a house. It's a part of her, and it's a part of us too. We'll always be connected no matter where we are." We sat there for a long time, watching the stars appear in the night sky, each one a reminder of the vastness of the universe, of how small we were in the grand scheme of things, but also how connected we were, how deeply intertwined our lives had been, and how they would continue to be. Patricia's memory would always live on in us, in the choices we made, in the love we shared, and in the way we chose to honor her every day. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The years that followed felt like a delicate balance between holding on and letting go. We continued to visit the house in Europe every year, just like we'd promised. Each trip felt a little different, like we were stepping into a new chapter of our lives while still carrying the weight of the old one. It wasn't that we were trying to forget Patricia, it was more that we were learning to live with her absence. The house had become a place of healing for us, a place where we could reflect, remember, and even laugh about the things that used to make us smile. But more importantly, it became a place where we could create new memories, new experiences that were just ours. My son had grown up so much in those few years. The little boy who had clung to me for comfort was now a young man, one who had learned how to navigate life on his own, yet still remained anchored in the love and values Patricia and I had given him. It was a bittersweet realization. I was proud of him, so proud of how far he had come. but I also couldn't help but miss the younger version of him, the one who needed me in a way he no longer did. I knew that this was part of life, watching your child grow up and step into their own world. But it was a reminder that change was inevitable, that time moved forward whether you were ready for it or not. One summer, we decided to stay at the house for a whole month, something we had never done before. We wanted to immerse ourselves in the space, to fully experience what it was like to live there, even if it was just for a short time. It was an opportunity to explore new traditions, to make this place our own in ways that were personal and meaningful to us. We filled the days with quiet moments, long walks through the vineyards, and evenings spent sitting around the table, reminiscing about Patricia, about our life before and after her death. We also made new plans, things we had put off for so long, like gardening in the backyard, planting trees in Patricia's memory, and making the house feel like it was truly ours. One afternoon, as we were working in the garden, my son turned to me with a thoughtful expression. He had been quiet for a while, lost in his thoughts as he dug into the soil. "Dad," he said, wiping his brow, "do you ever think about what Mom would have wanted for us, for this place?" I paused, the question catching me off guard. It was something I hadn't really thought about in a long time, but it was a good question, an important one. "I think about it all the time," I said slowly. "I think she would have wanted us to make this place our own, to turn it into something that felt like home. But not just any home. A place where we could be who we are without any expectations or pressure. A place where we could live fully, where we could remember her, but also keep moving forward." My son nodded, looking down at the plants we had just put in the ground. "I think you're right. I think she would have wanted us to make the most of what we have. To keep living, to keep going, even when it's hard." It was a moment of clarity for both of us, a realization that we weren't just carrying Patricia's memory, we were continuing her legacy. By living our lives fully, by embracing the future while honoring the past, we were doing exactly what she would have wanted. We weren't stuck in the grief anymore, we weren't frozen in time, we had found a way to move forward together. The rest of the month passed in a peaceful blur of daily routines, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. The house began to feel less like a symbol of what we had lost, and more like a testament to what we had gained. It was a place of growth, of healing, of new beginnings. Every corner of the house was filled with the memories of the past, but it was also filled with the promise of the future. As the month came to a close, we stood together on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills once again. My son had grown into someone I could be proud of, someone who had embraced life with the same resilience that Patricia had shown, and I felt a deep sense of peace. "Do you think we're ready to go back?" I asked, my voice quiet in the evening air. He looked at me, his eyes full of understanding, and smiled. "Yeah, I think we're ready." We had made our peace with the past, but we had also learned to embrace the future. We had created a new chapter in our lives, one that was filled with love, memories, and the promise of more to come. As we left the house that summer, I knew that we would carry it with us, in our hearts and in our memories. It would always be a part of us, a reminder of Patricia's love, and a symbol of the strength we had found in each other. Returning home, after our month in Europe, felt strangely different this time. It wasn't the rush of daily life that overwhelmed me, or the realization that the house in Europe was still there, waiting for us to return. No, it was something deeper, something I hadn't anticipated, the feeling that we were truly beginning a new chapter, not just as individuals, but as a family. It wasn't that we had moved on from the past, but rather that we had found a way to incorporate it into our future, to let it coexist with the lives we were building for ourselves. The house in Europe had become more than just a place. It had become a symbol of resilience, of memory, and most importantly, of love. It was a tangible connection to Patricia, but it was also a place where we could grow, where we could continue to honor her while embracing the future. For the first time since her death, I felt like I was living in the present, not weighed down by the past, but not running away from it either. My son had started his own life in a way, diving into his studies and his passions with a renewed sense of purpose. He had always been a thoughtful, introspective young man, but there was something different about him now, something I hadn't seen before. He wasn't the same boy I had brought to that house in Europe, uncertain and grieving. He had become someone with a quiet strength, someone who had learned to navigate life's challenges with grace, and I couldn't have been prouder of him. In the months that followed, we continued our annual visits to the house. Each trip was slightly different from the last. There were moments of silence, moments of reflection, and moments of deep conversation. We would walk through the gardens, hand in hand, taking the time to talk about the things that mattered about our future, about the things we had learned, and of course, about Patricia. Her presence was always with us, woven into the fabric of everything we did. And yet, with each passing year, we found ourselves making new memories. Memories that were ours, memories that would carry us into the future. One day, a few years later, my son came to me with a question that caught me off guard. It was one of those questions that came from a place of deep thought, a place where he was beginning to shape his own vision of the future. "Dad," he said, sitting down beside me, "have you ever thought about what we're going to do with the house when we're gone? What happens to it then?" The question hung in the air, a reminder that nothing lasts forever. The house had been a part of our lives for so long, and yet time was moving forward, and eventually we would have to let go of it. I had never really thought about it in those terms before. The house had always been a symbol of our past, of the love Patricia and I had shared, but now it was a part of our future too, and that future seemed more uncertain than ever. "I've thought about it, but I don't know," I replied, my voice quiet. "It's hard to imagine letting go of something that has been such a big part of our lives. But I suppose, at some point, we'll have to. Everything changes, whether we want it to or not." He nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, but I don't want it to just be a memory. I want it to keep going, to be something that future generations can remember, something that keeps her spirit alive." The idea struck me. It was a different way of thinking about the house, less about ownership and more about legacy. It wasn't just about keeping the house for ourselves. It was about passing it on, about making sure that Patricia's memory, her dreams, and the love that had been built there would continue, even after we were gone. It wasn't just about holding on to something physical. It was about ensuring that the love we had for each other and the memories we had created would live on, no matter what. "You're right," I said, a sense of peace settling over me. "Maybe that's what we need to do. We need to find a way to keep it, but to let it go too. We can't hold on to it forever, but we can make sure it continues to be a part of our family's story." And just like that, a new idea began to form in my mind. We would find a way to pass on the house, to make sure it became a part of our family's legacy, a place where future generations could come, a place that would hold all the love and memories of our time there. We could make it into something that was no longer just about us, but about the future, about the generations that would carry the stories forward. We talked about it over the next few weeks, figuring out how we could make this vision a reality. We began to think about the future, about how we could pass on the house to the next generation in a way that honored Patricia's memory and kept the spirit of the place alive. It wasn't easy, and it would take time, but we were committed to the idea. In the process, I realized something important. Letting go of the house didn't mean letting go of Patricia. It didn't mean leaving her behind. It meant giving the house a new purpose, one that would ensure her memory would continue to be a part of our lives, no matter where we went or how far we traveled. As I looked at my son, I could see the same determination in his eyes that I had seen in mine when we first decided to keep the house. We were no longer just holding on to the past, we were using it to build the future. The idea of passing the house down through generations started to feel like more than just a practical solution. It became a vision, a way of keeping Patricia's spirit alive for years to come. We began making plans, talking to legal advisors, and discussing with other family members how we could turn the house into a family legacy, a place where future generations could gather and make their own memories. It felt like the right thing to do, a way of honoring what Patricia had loved and believed in. There were many steps to take, of course. Legal documents needed to be drawn up, and we had to carefully think about how the house would be maintained and cared for in the years to come. It wasn't just about passing it down, it was about making sure it was preserved, that it would always be a sanctuary for our family, no matter how many years passed. The conversations with my son became more frequent as we talked about the future, about what this place would mean for his children and his children's children. We talked about making it a retreat, a place for family reunions, a sanctuary for reflection and peace. We envisioned a place where our descendants could gather, not just to remember the past, but to live fully in the present, surrounded by the beauty and serenity that Patricia had so loved. We would make it a space that wasn't just about nostalgia, it would be a place of renewal, of growth, and of connection. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching another sunset over the hills, my son turned to me with a smile. "I think we're doing something really important, Dad, not just for us, but for everyone who comes after us." I looked at him, the pride swelling in my chest. I had watched him grow into a thoughtful, compassionate young man, someone who cared deeply about family and tradition. He was more than ready to take on the responsibility of continuing this legacy. But more than that, he was excited about it. He saw the value in what we were doing, in the way we were turning our grief into something meaningful. "I think so too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "It's not just about holding on to the past, it's about creating something that will last, something that will keep your mum's spirit alive in a way that will touch generations to come. It's about making sure this place continues to be a place of love and connection. The good friend, as in mycket gest and which is de talent." The idea of a family legacy began to take shape, and with each passing day, it felt like a natural extension of everything we had gone through. The house, once a symbol of loss, had become a symbol of strength, of resilience, and of love. It wasn't about keeping things the way they had been, it was about creating something new, something that would live on, far beyond our own lifetimes. The process wasn't always easy. There were times when the reality of what we were doing hit me hard, and I found myself grieving once again, mourning the fact that Patricia wouldn't be there to see this vision come to life. But then I would think about how she had always encouraged us to live fully, to embrace the future, and to make the most of every moment we had. In a way, this new chapter was her final gift to us, a way to carry on her legacy, to continue her work in the world even after she was gone. As we finalized the plans and prepared to share the news with the rest of the family, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was the right thing to do. We were taking something beautiful, something that had once been filled with sorrow, and turning it into a symbol of hope, of continuity, and of love. It wasn't just about preserving the house, it was about preserving what it stood for. It was about making sure that the lessons we had learned from Patricia's life and from our shared grief would continue to be passed down through the generations. The day we made the official announcement to the family was one I would never forget. As we gathered together to share the news, I could see the pride in my son's eyes, the joy in the faces of our extended family, and the sense of unity that enveloped us all. This wasn't just about a house, it was about family, about community, and about the deep, unbreakable bond we shared. That night, as we stood together in the garden looking up at the stars, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I was grateful for the life we had shared, for the lessons we had learned, and for the love that continued to guide us. And as I looked at my son, I realized that this journey wasn't just about me, it was about us, about all of us, carrying forward what Patricia had taught us and making sure that the love and wisdom she had passed down would never fade. In the years that followed, the house in Europe became more than just a family retreat. It became a symbol of our resilience, our commitment to one another, and our ability to find hope, even in the face of loss. It was a place where we continued to honor Patricia's memory, a place where we found strength in each other and in the legacy we were creating together. And as I stood there, surrounded by the people I loved, I realized that Patricia's spirit was still with us, guiding us, loving us, and reminding us that the greatest gift we could give her was to continue living fully, to continue loving, and to continue carrying her memory forward for as long as we could.